I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And I'm just so thrilled to be here to talk about my subject that in the last decade I've become so passionate about talking about, which is emotions. The first third of my life, I was terrified of my emotions and I stayed away from them. And then I learned about them and it was a life-changing experience. And in my work as a psychotherapist, in this special way of working with emotions in the body as well as thoughts, which are so important. I love my thoughts, but it's the combination of everything together that I just became more and more passionate that people were getting better, and my colleagues and the patients that we were treating were sharing this information, and it was so helpful. And then I just thought, why is this information staying in this really small group of therapists and patients, that it really is public health education to at least understand intellectually why we have emotions and how they function in the mind and body, pardon me, and how to use them to thrive as opposed to burying them, which causes us all these mental health symptoms like anxiety and depression. And I'm here with Jennifer, who is the executive director, the whole reason that we're here, who started Seek Healing. I think, is that correct?
That's right. Yes.
And we're going to sort of do, pardon me, an interview type format, I think. So I'm going to I jumped right in because that's what I do, but I'm going to.
That's great. We were already getting rolling.
My controlling stance to you. And,
oh, it's perfect. We're already right in here with my first question for you today, Hillary. And I just want to say that it's such a pleasure to be here with you. I've so enjoyed our connection as we continue to the way that your work, you're speaking to, kind of democratizing education about emotional awareness is so in line with Seek Healing's mission, and making this information and these practices more accessible to humans everywhere. I believe so deeply that that's exactly what the missing piece is to creating more widespread healing and transformation in our world. So I know the change triangle that Hillary's referencing is just such a powerful tool, and we're about to explain in more detail what it is exactly. But if you feel moved to, or if you're interested in getting your hands on it yourself, we are selling it in our online bookstore with our bookstore partner, Firestorm Books and Coffee. So on the landing page for this event, you can go right below the main image at the top. There's a little bookstore section, and Hillary's book, it's called It's Not Always Depression. Is that right, Hillary?
Yes. And that's so nice. I didn't even know you were selling the book there. That's terrific.
There you go.
Just 2 words on that. I know not everybody likes to read, and not everybody can afford books. And so what I've really tried to do is just load up my website and the Change Triangle YouTube channel with resources. But the reason that the book is important, it's just basically an emotion education in a box that pretty much, I think, 15-year-old and up can understand, because I took out kind of all the psychobabble and the jargon so that it was accessible. What the book has a lot of that the resources don't are full stories from my practice of what it looks like to move from depressed, traumatic, disconnected, numbed out states, which we're going to look at the top of this triangle, and how to reconnect with one's emotions, and through that with one's authentic self, which is where we all want to spend much more time. It's where we're calm and connected. And I'm going to go through, and the Change Triangle is really just kind of a nice pithy tool that I adapted from the academic literature. It was being taught to therapists who specialize in this very sort of, it's now growing, but it was a specialized form of psychotherapy. And I just simply took that triangle and customized it for to provide the basic education and emotions that I'm hoping with my work one day people will be getting in high school health class or in high school biology, because we learn we have a heart and lungs and muscles, those just work automatically. What we don't learn is what emotions are, why we have them. They're painful, they get us into trouble. And so if we understand a little bit about them, it's a huge advantage. And I can't for the life of me figure out why we don't get this education, except that I think we live in an emotion phobic culture. And so we basically, it's like a vicious cycle of people don't know what to do with emotions and they stay away from them because that's the best strategy they have. And so hopefully you'll be learning something a little bit to tease you, right? Just a taste to see if you want to learn more, and then you can go access all those other resources.
Yeah, well, and what's so great about it is that you will be able to leave this talk actually with a pretty immediate understanding of this tool that's immediately applicable. I found it so useful myself in my personal life, as well as my practice and the work that we're doing at Seek. So yeah, so I want to just go ahead and dive into it. And I guess I'll invite everyone to, can everyone hear okay, first of all? I was just seeing a couple, okay, great. I just want to invite everybody that as you have questions, you can go ahead and throw them in the chat. I'm going to be keeping an eye on them so I can pass them along to Hillary as we go. And there will be a couple minutes for general Q&A at the very end. We'll try to leave a few minutes for that. So,
Right. So
yeah.
I'm going to pop up just a few slides. I have mixed feelings about slides, but I'm going to just go through a couple because a picture's worth 1,000 words. So what we're in essence saying is that we want to use the power of emotions to foster connection. They're just crucial for connection to ourselves and connection to others. And let's see. Okay. So the questions that I was trying to think, what are we pondering? Why is it important to understand emotions for better health? 2, why is it important to understand how emotions work in the mind and most especially the body? Because what most people, you sort of can have a feeling that you're having an emotion in your head, but you're really having an experience in your body, and your perceptive brain is reading your body and popping out with, oh, I feel anxious, I feel sad. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, but that we need to understand emotions if we want to have a lifelong process of bettering our relationships. And then how do we use the change triangle for both? And again, I just want, I don't want anyone to feel bad if the change triangle doesn't make sense right away, because like for me, I had all this psychological kind of background. My dad was a psychiatrist. And when I saw the change triangle, it immediately helped my mental health. My husband would say it took him 10 years to really get it. So, and everything in between. But it's the working, it's the trying, it's the reading and the learning that's important. So one thing I that's important to share for people that work with people who suffer addiction and trauma and all these states of despair, I really believe and have seen evidence and feel so strongly that there is always hope for healing and for feeling better. And I believe that for 3 scientific reasons, because I'm a big believer in science, and I'm a science nerd, and that my whole background was in science. So one reason is that the brain can change. They used to think that you got to a certain age and the brain stopped changing. And now we know from research that the brain is continuing to rewire, and it rewires based on our experience. And so from birth to death, we can have new learning, right? That's what learning is. It's taking in something and making it stick. And whether it's a mindfulness practice in combination with the change triangle or other ways, gratitude practices, what we're doing is we're sort of, we're creating a new pathway that we're going to reinforce. And then really when you put your mind to it and have the confidence to keep doing something new, we get better at it, and it feels better and things change. The second reason there's always hope for healing and change is that good relationships create an environment for healing. And that's what Seek Healing is all about. And what you're getting this weekend. And as you engage in the listening training, which I hope you all will take, and the connection meetings, it's transformational. And lastly, experiencing emotions is the most powerful catalyst for healing in a moment that I have come across. And that's what the change triangle is. So we say in this type of therapy, AEDP, that I do, that if one moment of trauma, one terrible thing can change your life, can change your brain, can change your outlook for the worse, one powerful moment of healing can change your mind, change your brain for the better. And we are catalyzing healing through the processing of deep emotional processes in this type of therapy in the context of a safe and secure and, dare I say, loving relationship. The recipe for thriving in life is this idea of safe connections with emotion education, so we know what to do and how to work with our emotions, allows us to feel our feelings, deal with our feelings and what's happening out in life, and relate all at the same time. And when we can feel and deal and relate, we really have all the tools to meet life's challenges. And you can see these pictures here, just to take a look at them for a moment. I put them up to be evocative. If you look at the top left of what it means to feel safe and warm, and if you take a look at that picture on the top left and just notice what it evokes in your body, whatever it is, right? Warmth, longing, jealousy, despair, whatever it is, just we want to validate it. The same thing on this top right. We all know that feeling when our nerves are so fried, we feel like we could just snap. And that's not what we want. And that's not what we want to create. We're wanting to create this. And then in adult relationships, I just put these two evocative pictures. One where on the right, the sense of disconnection and people just left with a broken heart and in pain, and that horrible feeling of disconnection, versus this idea that we are always connected, that we've got two people and we've got this third thing happening, the relationship. And we all know that feeling when that relationship, when we feel emotionally connected, heart to heart connection, and how important that is. So we're trying to lean in as to create this as parents, and then to create this when we didn't get what we needed as adults, to learn how to create positive connection. It's really interesting to think what messages we had about emotions growing up. I just put some of my thoughts down here. Did you grow up in a family where it's not okay to have emotions? I just can't have emotions, because if I go there, I'm not going to come back. I'm going to be overwhelmed. Or that emotions are for weak people, and that we just have to pick ourselves up and get over it and plow through, right? That may work a little bit in a moment, but as a chronic coping mechanism, we end up eventually not feeling well and feeling disconnected. We might have grown up with parents and teachers that told us, just mind over matter, right? That's what I thought. I thought that emotions were something to be controlled. And so what that did is I kept pushing and pushing and pushing and distracting myself from my anxiety that we all have, especially when we're younger, until those defenses for mine, they were just keeping very busy, really broke through. And I started to have symptoms. And when stress got so much, in my late 20s and early 30s, I was going through a divorce. I was having to figure out a new career because I used to be a dentist and that didn't work out. And there was so much going on that I all of a sudden crashed and burned and ended up in bed and having to go on Prozac, which thank God for Prozac, but it humbled me. I was like, okay, so I guess it's not mind over matter. So what is it? Other messages are that the smarter we are, the stronger we are. And we now know there's different types of intelligence, and being very, very smart has nothing to do whether we are emotionally able to tolerate that. We've got really two tracks, our logical thinking and our emotional world, and they're often running parallel and they're not connecting, and they want different things. Other messages like, don't be a drama queen, don't talk about your feelings. Like Damien said when he asked, his dad, how are you feeling? God forbid, that it's triggering. We don't talk about feelings. No one wants to hear or see my feelings. Many of us grew up that way. It's not okay to have emotional needs, and it's not okay to be different, to be my authentic self. If I come from a family where everybody's the same, but I'm a little different, either my gender is different, my sexuality is different, my interests are different, I want different things. So these are messages that are the beginnings of where we start to squelch who we are, and we start to squelch our authentic emotional expressions. So core emotions are a compass for living. And I want to clarify that we want to know what our emotions are. We want to work with our emotions, but we want to, after we are with our emotions, which are an internal process, we want to also bring on rational thought, common sense on what to do with the emotions that we now become aware of. So it's not just, I have an emotion and I'm just leaking it everywhere. I'm aware that I have these feelings, and I'm aware that I have to do something with them. And then there's many, many tips, techniques, help, all sorts of ways to work with emotions, depending on whether they're little ones that can be sorted out, like I'm a little angry at my partner and I know I have to, and I get up the courage to say it and I work out the problem, versus people that have years and years and years of trauma from abuse and neglect and being marginalized. And those people have very complex emotions that are harder to sort out. And because overwhelming emotions and symptoms cause us symptoms like depression, anxiety, and every type of diagnosis practically in the DSM, these things, we develop symptoms because we have too much emotions in the face of too much aloneness. And that's what causes trauma. And so to reverse that, we need to be with somebody safe and then revive those emotions from the past. So we can go from simple, just understanding the intellectual education about emotions, to processing our deep traumas. Okay, so I'm going to briefly go through this. Jennifer, interrupt me to let me know how fast I should go, but I'm just going to, again, this is a lifetime of study and beginning to work this change triangle. But as you can see, we have an upside down triangle that if you superimpose on your body, the point of the triangle will be, this is the point where emotions is going to be around your core, because core emotions are in the body. And then when we lift away from emotions, we kind of tend to go up into our head, and the top of the triangle here with these inhibitory emotions, anxiety, guilt, and shame on one side, and defenses, which I'm defining as these amazing creative ways that we figure out how to not feel anything. And so this is really a map of how to work with emotions in the mind and body. So I'm just going to go over this 3 corners, which I, in a little more, just highlights from each one. We are born ready, all of us, men, women, and every gender in between, with the same core emotions, ready to act as these survival programs that tell us how the environment is affecting us. So babies come out, and anyone who's been with babies knows that they don't really inhibit yet. When they are angry, you see it. They scream bloody murder. When they're happy and excited, you see it. And so we all have these same emotions. sadly, a lot of men in the society feel that they, that they don't have sadness and they don't have fear, and they're taught and socialized not to have these emotions. And same thing, like women are taught it's not nice to be angry, and it's not nice to be very sexual, have a lot of sexual excitement. And these things are changing, but it's really important to know that we all have the same 7 core emotions. And there are other emotions like love and longing, and these things are the relational emotions. But I picked for the change triangle as the basic emotion education to start with, these emotions that really actually that cause people the most struggle when they don't have access to them.
It's interesting too, because it kind of seems like those other emotions you named, or the other feeling words I can imagine, are kind of derivatives of these core 7 as well. Like love seems to be connected to joy, and longing with sexual excitement or otherwise.
Exactly. And we often have many emotions at one time, and they can be opposite in nature. But I would just think of these as 7 unique programs that we are all wired to experience from the get-go, and they just are. Nobody can control these, because the whole purpose of these emotions is that they are triggered without any conscious control. We have here's my brain here. And if we were to cut the brain in half, this is where emotions happen. It's in the middle of the brain here, but we think and we have consciousness, mostly with the top of the brain. So the idea is that we have, let's say, somebody, let's say it's the easiest example. I use it all the time, but a wild animal is running towards you. Your eyes and ears and skin, if something is brushing past you, right, all the 5 senses will pick up and detect that there's a threat, and that will send a message down to the lower brain and to connect with every organ in the body through the vagus nerve, which is the largest nerve in the body. And the goal of this fear and all the core emotions is to get your body ready for some very rapid action, some automatic action. So to get you to either survive, like running from something dangerous, or to thrive, like excitement causes us to be interested and move towards things that excite us, so that we can learn new things and have a generative experience. So these core emotions, if you take one thing from today, just know that your core emotions just are. So you never want to judge yourself for your core emotions, and you never want to judge others for their core emotions. But that is different than any behavior that is generated, right? And behavior we do want to think about. So we can't stop the program from coming. We can't stop our body from reacting to the emotions that are triggered. It's only after we become aware of them, as we work this triangle, that the last step is to think through what to do with this experience that we're having. And core emotions, really, what I mean by experiencing a core emotion is we know we're having it, we can name it. I am sad. I know I am sad because I can detect in my body what is letting me know that I'm sad. I have a heaviness in my chest, for example, or I feel something behind my eyes that makes me know I want to cry. I need to be able to tolerate those feelings in my body, the sensations that my core emotions create. And I do that with a practice of knowing that I can tolerate them. And if I can stay with those sensations, often they will move forward like waves. And I will recognize an impulse of what this emotion wants to do. And then I think through, do I want to express this impulse in some constructive way? Do I want to process it internally? But that's the idea, that we are playing with these, that we are dealing with these core emotions. Now, when a core emotion happens and we have no control over it, all we can do is become aware of it. We have 2 choices. Sometimes these choices are unconscious, but we're trying to make them conscious now. One way is that we can validate it. We can name it, we can feel it, we can see what it's trying to tell us. And when we do that and we lean into it and we move through it, that takes us to the connection with our authentic self. We now know what we feel, we know what we want, we are okay with that, we have skills to work with that. And by a process of doing that over and over again, we spend more and more time in this state of the authentic self, which is called the open-hearted state. And we know we're there because it's marked by these C words like calm, and our body is calm, right? We all know the difference when we feel kind of calm and good for when we feel like tense, or when we feel anxious, or when we feel in pain. So we know we're kind of in this state when we feel more calm, we feel more curious in others and the world around us and ourselves and our partners and our family members. We feel connected to ourselves because we have connected to ourselves. And therefore, we're more able to tolerate the emotions and feel connected to other people, even in difficult emotional states. In this state of authentic self, we feel more compassionate to ourselves and to others. We feel more confident because we can tolerate taking chances, even though they're going to bring up emotions like fear and anxiety and potentially rejection and shame. But we can deal with these emotions because we know that it's just part of being human, and we have skills and techniques to do that. When we're authentic, we tend to feel more creative, courageous, and clear in our thought. We're less obsessive, we're less perfectionistic, ruminating. It's a great state. Now, it's not a state any of us can be in all the time. And it's also a state that we can have a lot of emotions and hang on to. And really, that's ultimately the goal, is to hang on to this, to have some sort of solid sense of self that we can notice what's happening with. That's the feeling, dealing, and relating all at the same time, even in an emotional storm. And again, this is a lifelong process. I often think of like how unfair it is that I get this image of like, by the time I'm like 85 and I'm going to be like, I finally get it all. I understand it all. And then, but that's how it is. So we keep practicing. Now, if we have an emotion.
Yeah, if I can, Hillary, I was just going to say that something that I appreciate that so much. And I'm really like, what's standing out to me a lot is what you're saying about how there's this decision point. What we're trying to become aware of is more consciously this decision point between can I become aware of my emotional state, this core emotion that's happening, and move into this open-hearted state. And as you're speaking to that, I was just thinking of, because you said what's needed then is to become aware and then just experience whatever it is that's happening, like really ride the whole wave wherever it's taking us. And that like that calmness and curiosity and sense of connectedness isn't necessarily immediate, but it's the result of being with whatever comes up. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. And that results in so many ways. We may be upset, but in that, if we have access to that, we can have more, we can connect to other people authentically. And if we can't connect to our family members, we have the courage to connect, like through Seek Healing, to find connection. And through that connection, we're transformed, and we feel more and more calm because we don't feel so alone in the world anymore. And
yeah, but it really begins with accepting this emotional state just as it is without trying to push it away, or I guess that's what you're going to next.
Yeah, it comes with the idea that that's what is entailed. That's what we have to do. But depending on how much adversity we all experienced, we may need help first to do that. It may be that we can't even think to dip down into our body and experience a sensation, that it's too overwhelming. And that's where trauma therapy comes in. But most of us can, to some degree, work this change triangle on our own. And just to understand how emotions work, for me, made me so much less afraid of them. That's the first step, is to understand the whole enchilada. And that's where reading It's Not Always Depression really helps, because you'll see exactly what it's like. They're very evocative stories, so that it's almost like being a fly on the wall. And when you're having a very painful feeling, you can at least say, okay, I know what's happening now. I don't feel so frightened of it, even though I'm in deep pain. And I know it's temporary, as most emotional states are.
Mhm.
Yeah, so if we just, and then we'll move on just briefly. So again, we're at this crossroads. So when an emotion hits us and we don't know how to work with emotions, what most of us learn to do automatically to survive is to our body feels this emotion coming. We get scared, and we clamp down on it with anxiety in the form of any type of muscular contraction or stopping breathing. There's many ways that we can stop the flow of core emotional energy. Three ways that we do it are anxiety, guilt, and shame. And each one of these is worth learning a lot about. Anxiety uh, is really a good thing to try to understand, because anytime we're anxious, I mean, at least for me, when I'm anxious, that's a signal that I have to look for my underlying core emotions. And same thing when I feel shame or guilt. But the way, the mechanisms that these three inhibitory emotions block core emotions are all different. And the way you lower, because anxiety is part of normal life, shame, there's healthy shame, and guilt, there's healthy guilt, right? We have shame as an adaptive emotion to keep us civilized so that we work as a society all together. So we needed core emotions to evolve so we could protect ourselves, but we need inhibitory emotions also so that we are not selfish and just killing and stealing and doing whatever we want. So if the core emotions are like the selfish emotions, what's good for me, the inhibitory emotions are what's good for me to stay in the good graces of my cohort, whether it's my parents, then my siblings, then my elementary school, my religious organizations, my groups, my peer groups. But when we have too much anxiety, too much shame, too much guilt, and we have shame for the wrong reasons, when we start to feel shame for who we are and what we feel and what we need, we know that that's not healthy. And the way we back up from that is to try to see, if we didn't go to shame, what emotion would we be feeling? What emotion came up first that then triggered, it's not okay if we have this emotion. It didn't work out well in our childhood, so I'm going to pull in like a turtle in a shell, squash myself down with shame, and I may not feel good, but I'm not risking rejection or I'm not risking humiliation. So these, again, are protective mechanisms. And then basically, when we have core emotions coursing through our body, inhibitory emotions pushing down on them, it feels so awful that the mind figured out that evolved to be able to spare us and go on with life. And those are the defenses. And growing up, I thought with a psychiatrist in my family, defenses were sort of a bad word, but in AEDP, we don't think of defenses as bad. We think of them as protective. And we really honor defenses, but we look at their costs versus their benefit. And while we needed defenses when we were young, in the time that we needed them to survive because we had too many emotions and we were left too alone with them, as we get older and we have mature brains and we have words to talk about how we feel and to negotiate needs, we rely on defenses way too much. And sometimes just a few words to know that we can like actually speak these words, we forget, even though we're adults, that we can say something like, hey, I just noticed what I said really like got your back up. What did I do? What bothered you? That type of thing, that we can begin to try to have conversations in relationships. But we want to also notice our own defenses so that we can get curious about them. Like if I didn't go for a glass of wine right now, what would I have to deal with? What would I be feeling in my body? What sensations would feel uncomfortable? Or if I didn't, eat this loaf of bread, or if I didn't start wondering why I wasn't good enough, or if I didn't start controlling everybody in my family, if I didn't do that maneuver, those are all defenses. What weird feeling would I have to contend with? What impulse, what need, that type of thing. And so just lastly, so we're rotating around this triangle all throughout the day, pretty much, and all throughout our lives, sort of in a micro way throughout the day. And then in a macro way, hopefully we're using less defenses, less inhibitory emotions, and over time becoming more and more authentic and able to communicate needs to ourselves and to our wounded parts inside and to the people we care about.
Yeah, so it's really like we are kind of constantly in this, it's somewhere on this triangle. And I think what I'm getting is that cultivating that awareness and kind of starting to understand where we are at any given moment will give us a signal to, okay, well, what's the emotion beneath that? Or if I'm experiencing a core emotion, can I just be with this? To feel where I'm going. And I remember that you've been, we were talking a little bit before this about how when we get to that, to those C's and that open-hearted state, that's, you said, a place of authentic connection with self, and how it's really from that place that we can connect authentically with others. So I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more to how that happens and what happens when two triangles come together.
Yeah, so I just wanted to show this. This is like what I would call the change triangle cheat sheet, what to do at each corner. And this is on my website. You can download it. You can download the change triangle. You can take it. You can share it. You can use it in your groups. Just it's there to be taken and shared and used. This is from a page in the book where at the end where I sum it all up. And you just sort of said it. Yeah, I think, Jennifer, you were alluding to sort of what you do. We move aside defenses. We transform anxiety, shame, and guilt in a variety of different ways, which are learnable. And then we ride the wave of our emotions. And when we feel calm, we stay there as long as possible. And when we feel positive emotions, we stay there as long as possible by tuning into how they feel in the body and breathing through it. So, okay, so yes, so the idea of the idea of two change triangles is to wonder, how are we relating and where are we both on the change triangle in a given moment? So we can relate, and I'm wondering if, as people can visualize this as I say this, we can relate from defense to fence. Like that would be like somebody walking into a house and at the end of the day and say, yelling, "Get me a drink." And the other person walking out of the room and saying, "You suck, I can't stand you," right? So those are like two defensive, crusty, they're not connecting. It's very lonely, right? That's what we're trying to get away from. We can relate from one anxious person to another, from one shamed person to another, which is really not much connection because everybody's in a protective way. Anxiety, I just imagine a household where just everybody's like vibrating at a high level and again, running around cracked or hiding. Nobody is sort of, everybody's at a high level of arousal in their body. Guilt to guilt is a stressed connection. What we want to relate more is these two bottom ones, core emotion to core emotion and authentic self to authentic self, but what happens is we crisscross. And so what we want to know is, where am I on the change triangle right now? And where is somebody else? And in order to do this, we have to slow down. It's the first step to getting in touch with yourself and with being with another person. And so if someone in a relationship is coming in all sped up and yelling or restless leg syndrome or frenetic, it's like, and we're going to have a talk about something, you really want to say, hey, can we just take a moment to slow down together? Let's just take a seat, feel our feet on the ground, see if we can shift into some part of that authentic self, try to really shift right into some of those C's, even if it's just accessing some curiosity in myself and the other. So that's what I meant about two triangles. I also put up this slide. I don't know, Jennifer, if we should get to that at the end or now, but these are just some good, I find people underestimate the power of having words to deal with a situation that's not going well. And so I just jotted down some phrases that communicate something authentically. And it's not like you're guaranteed to get something back that's positive from that, but it may feel good just to say these things.
Yeah, I think they're really helpful. And we might, what I'm thinking is we can put them up again during the Q&A in a couple minutes. And also there's been a couple questions coming through about getting access to this later. We will be sending out this recording, which includes Hillary's slides next week after the fact. So everyone will have access to these as well. As long as you send them over to Joey and I, we can send them out to everybody after the fact. But I have had a couple really interesting questions come through that I wanted to presence for you. And I know we also kind of want to demo what it feels like to relate triangle to triangle. So are you open to a couple questions first?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a couple really juicy ones in here. From William, there's this question about, it sounds like he's been doing a lot of continuous work on emotional awareness and understanding how to be with emotions last few years, especially working with Seek Healing. And he's feeling more grounded and able to analyze his emotions now, but still has this relationship with the inner procrastinator and inner addict. And is wondering if you have any specific recommendations for how to break through those even more, or any advanced practices, something else that he can do besides simply continuing to feel them and be with them, hoping that that experience subsides.
Yes. Yes. There is another type of therapy. I'm just saying this only because there's a book to read that might help with this, but this is where this is based off. That is about getting to know, and I write about this in the books because I use AEDP and something called internal family systems therapy. Those marry very well together, and those marry very well as a self-help practice also. So what I would say, William, is you want to kind of get to know the procrastinator part of you and the part that maybe craves substances or that has some relationship with substances that you are trying to minimize and bolster other coping strategies. And when you sense those parts in you, it's almost like we want to dialogue with them, because again, if we appreciate the procrastinator part, and I guess I want to ask you what you would call that part that I want to be, we want to be very respectful and to honor parts of us that struggle. So I don't know whether you would call it the part that feels addicted, or the part that feels the craving part. Is there a name that I could refer to that part of you as respectfully?
You can just, for all intents and purposes, to make it quick, you can simply refer to it as the addict part of me, even though that's not how I relate, but just to make it easy.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So I would, one at a time, as you sense them, see if you can have a connection to that part, almost imagining it, like asking it to step back a little bit to give you, your authentic self, some breathing room, and to ask it, how it's here, how it's trying to help you right now. Both the procrastinator, I would talk to any part this way, and to see if it answers, and then to listen, to really sort of imagine that this is a separate person, if you will, almost, and you can even try to get an image of these parts of ourselves and dialogue with them and really listen and try to appreciate the purpose. I think, I wonder if Gabor Mate is going to talk about some of this parts work. But often parts of us, if we talk to them and listen to them, will give us clues about what they're trying to do, that we can enlist wiser parts of us to really engage them and talk to them. Maybe they don't realize that there are other coping skills. Maybe those parts who were very alone when they came into being because that was the only option, or they actually, these parts of, they actually were clever in solving some other sort of problem. But we can have parts of us that don't talk to each other. They're very separate. I don't know whether any of you know people where you can sort of like in one moment they'll have sort of one reality and be talking sort of as though this is the reality, and in another moment be kind of talking in another reality. Like people where in the moment like everything is great, and then they kind of crash and burn and everything is bad, and nothing really has changed except their mood. And it's as though there's these kind of two separate people, and they need to, they're not connecting and taking in, they're each taking in different information. So the idea of connecting and talking to parts of us respectfully and really asking, how are you trying to help me right now? What did this part of me, the addicted part or the procrastinator part, what problem did that solve at one time? Does that make sense, William?
More sense than I can express. Yeah, thank you.
You're so welcome. There's a book on parts. The Internal Family Systems Therapy book, which is written for therapists, is actually quite easy to read. And it helps, it gives a perspective of the way we have parts of us that are sort of act as managers, parts that are firefighters, like addiction. That's when you have so much emotion close to the surface that we reach for, like, they're all protecting like these young exiled parts, as they're called, these like child parts that were desperately wounded. And so we have like these firefighter parts that are like have suicidal ideation, or they have they go to addiction, and then they come up in dire circumstances when they get too close to painful feelings. But then we have these manager parts that kind of are running they're the controlling parts of us, the procrastinator parts of us, the judging parts of us that are kind of operating in everyday life. And it's kind of a cool way to think of the various parts of us. And when I say parts, I mean, we're talking about neural networks that were wired in experiences. So most of us have several different types of parts. It doesn't mean we're Sybil or have, you know, dissociative identity disorder. These are just natural ways. Part of me feels this way, a part of me feels that way. It's just when we're about many minds of different things, and we can have conflicts that aren't reconcilable, and instead we have to talk to both parts and come to some sort of a negotiation.
Yeah, and so we have about 10 minutes left, Hillary, and there's a couple other questions in here that are really juicy. And I also know that, you know, we had planned to do this demo. So I'm wondering if you would like to do the demo, or you'd rather just stay with the questions. Do you have a preference?
No, but we could stay a little bit longer too for people that want to and play around with some role playing.
That's true. We do have until probably about 1:15 in this room.
Yeah.
So maybe we can come back to the questions, and we'll go ahead and do the demo now, and anything else that you want to say about ruptures and repairs, and how this works when we're navigating our emotional experience at the same time that someone else is maybe in their defensive place, and where you said defenses to defenses, or core emotions to core emotions.
Yeah. I'll just say a word about this little phrase that I like, this idea of rupture and repair, in that all throughout the day, it's very possible. If you think of a relationship, again, as I sort of like a string between my heart to your heart, and we want, or we can think of it as a space between us that's clear and open, so that we are, you know, emotions are contagious, and empathy and mirror neurons, these are all the ways that we are so deeply connected human beings, and emotions are contagious, and we want to be able to feel each other, and we want an open line of communication and this kind of space between us that we don't pollute. But what happens is every now and then, even if it's not our intention, we hurt someone else's feelings, or we get angry and we lose control for a minute and we say something hurtful. And then there's a break in the connection. You could think of it as a rupture in that cord between my heart to another's heart, or we could think of it as the space is now mucked up and polluted. So one, we want to really, in our relationships, you know, they say relationships take a tremendous amount of work. And really the reason is because in good relationships, you have to think before you speak, especially if you know you're not in a great state. If we don't think about the impact that our words are having on someone else, we're more likely to have a rupture with that person. And even if we do think we can have a rupture with that person, then we want to repair that rupture as quickly as possible. And if you have two people that are very, very upset, you may have to agree to calm down, but then you want to set, I believe in setting ground rules in relationships that if we are disconnected and we're upset, that's okay, we can take a break, but we agree that we're going to come back and talk about this, because in adult relationships, really all there is talking when it comes to solving problems and being closer. So rupture and repair is just it's a good phrase to know about. And it's something that you can talk about in your relationships. You can say, you know, I do you feel connected right now? I'm not feeling so connected to you. And why might, you know, if you're both feeling disconnected, why might that be? That you could talk about the quality of the relationship and without blaming. So again, in all this work, we're not blaming, we're not judging ourselves. That's very hard. And so it's an ideal again, but when we find ourselves blaming and judging, again, we want, if you can get curious about that, blame and judgment is a defense on the change triangle, because we typically don't do that unless we're having a feeling that we want to get rid of and discharge. And so we put it out, or we implode on ourselves and blame and judge ourselves. So yeah, so I think Jennifer, there was actually something that came up in my life yesterday. It reminded me of the role play that we did, where similar even to what Damien said about just kind of asking a question of wanting to help a family member and being met with that prickly, you know, I'm not talking about my feelings, or there's nothing wrong. Or we can do the role play and I can sort of say what that looks like, or we can try the role play the way that we designed it. I think that's with you saying something shaming to me, and I can kind of go through the process after working the change triangle for a decade, how that would be. Maybe we should start there.
Want to start there, and then if we have time, you can also let us know about what happened in your life yesterday.
It's similar. I think the most thing, the scariest, the reason people don't kind of step into a connected relationship is because they are afraid of being rejected or wounded in some way. And that happens a lot in relationships. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, do we give up, or do we figure out how to move through those moments and try to get to a better place? Undoubtedly, there are relationships where we just can't. We have to accept someone as they are, and they're not interested in a deeper connection. They're not interested in emotional connection. But sometimes they are. So there's and sometimes we can do things that just help ourselves going forward.
Yeah, and I know I would at least benefit, and I imagine I speak for all of us in kind of hearing how you would do that. So I'd love to hear you narrate the process, if you're open to me shaming you in a promise I'm not meaning it personally way.
Yeah, it's good. Okay. So go ahead. We're like talking and
yeah, I just take a breath and get into it here. Yeah, Hillary, honestly, I'm feeling kind of upset. What gives you the right to tell me about my emotions and how to process them and how they work? It just feels like a lot of audacity.
Okay. So now I just want you to know, as I take that in, I'm feeling my face get warm. And
I heard it's moving fast.
Yeah. It's okay. I'm going around the edges, and I feel my face get warm. And the first thing I can feel is this energy of wanting to get small, right? And that's protection, right? If I can sort of get small, there's two things I can imagine. If I can show, if we know that 75 to 80% of communication is nonverbal, if I go quiet and I go sad looking, you're going to get the message that you hurt me. That may piss you off more depending on your history and who you are, or that may make you lean in and to say, I'm sorry. But so I'm just aware that I'm wanting to go in, I'm wanting to put my head down. And at this point, you know, I could imagine crying. I could imagine saying sorry and walking away. I can imagine if I was somebody else, instead of going into shame, going into kind of arrogance, right? So what happens is there's two kind of defensive survival strategies that people have. They go into shame and they get small and they get sad and weepy, and it pulls them into a state that sometimes is very hard to get out of. Or they become aggressive and sort of arrogant, grandiose, like, who are you? And right, we start a fight now. Who are you to tell me that?
And even as you do that physically, I notice my body wanting to like kind of get big in response.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that's how things escalate. So I get big, then you get big, and we start calling each other names, or worse, right? These are how wars start. What I would do now is and again, this is with lots of practice, I'm aware as I'm pulling in that I am now, that you said something that triggered my shame. And I'm going to feel my feet on the ground and take a deep breath to kind of stop that inward experience, which is very hard. I can even, as I feel this tension between wanting to implode and get small and stay, I start to feel a headache in the top of my head. And so I'm going to be taking a deep breath. Now, what I might say in the moment to slow down the whole thing is, okay, wow, I think we had a misunderstanding. And I hear that, and it's hard to hear. I'm even like struggling. I think, Jen, what you said is that you didn't feel that I had a right to be sharing information on emotions, or can you say again what I did to offend you? So now I'm leaning in, not to the insult, but I'm trying to lean into that I did something to trigger Jennifer.
Yeah, I just, I feel like you were telling me what was going on with my feelings, and, they're mine to feel. It's not, I don't think that what you said is really true about what's going on for me.
Yeah, so let me say that back to you to make sure I understand. I hear at least two things. One, there's a feeling that I'm telling you how to feel. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
You always want to validate that you're hearing the right thing, because I'm still trying to understand. So I'm telling you, you didn't like that I was telling you how to feel. And what was the other thing? And again, this is like real. It's because I'm letting myself experience a dysregulation, right? I'm not in my authentic. I'm trying to hang on to my authentic state, but I'm trying to be with Jen too, and that she is not happy with me, and that I did something bad. So the other, can you say again what I did wrong?
Well, I just was saying, I mean, it feels really, I said audacious, like there's a lot of audacity in you assuming that you knew what was going on for me over here.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to assume that I knew your particular experience. That must have felt very intrusive. I hear
it did.
Not helpful. Yeah. Should I clarify what my intention was.
Yeah, I guess if that's not what you were trying, to get across, I'd love to hear what you meant.
Yeah. So my intention was just to provide some general education about emotions to be helpful. But if you don't like it, that's totally okay.
Well, I guess I must have kind of personalized what you were talking about, if you were really just trying to say something general.
How is that to hear? Like that I was just trying to say something general, and you could take or leave it, and you could hate it if you want. It's okay.
Well, it's interesting because even though this is a demo and there's a part of me that's trying to stay in the acting, and then as you said that, there was like a lessening in my nervous system, like oh, and I think there's something too about your tone or just the way that you were responding to me that brought my defenses down a little bit, even my imagined defenses.
Yeah, and I felt that too, as I could kind of get the words out and slow down. I mean, that's the trick for me when I get like flustered and when I'm in a relationship, like a squabble, anytime it's like, it starts to get swirly and I don't know what's happening, I just slow down. And I may even just say, I don't really know what's happening now. All I know is that we just had some interaction that just felt shitty for both of us. And I'm wondering if we can try to figure out what happened. Like, like we were going along and everything was okay with us, Jennifer. And then, what's the thing where we what's the one thing that I did that, like, when did it start? When did we go off the rails together? Was one thing that,
I think I'll have to make one up if that's okay.
Yeah. Well, that's we can maybe even pause that here, but that's sort of the general. I mean, there's a lot going on there, right? I'm regulating my shame by telling myself to slow down and put my feet on the floor and take a breath. And I'm trying to kind of move into my C's, which I have those C words on the top of my head so I can kind of try to find them inside. And then I'm trying to clarify what happened. I'm trying to stay connected, and I'm trying to not take the bait of the insult of the shaming experience. And we have some shame experts with us. I'm just seeing Brett and Sheila here. Hi guys. Did I do a good job with that? And yeah, and trying to pull myself together enough that I can keep that connection and show you my intent to repair.
Yeah, something that I'm wondering too, I don't know if anybody else has this question, but around, I witnessed you as we were workshopping that move really quickly into, not quickly, you slowed down and, reflected my experience and, brought us both back into a little bit more regulation. And I'm wondering if when emotions are a lot higher or hotter, if there's any tip you have for, if in this example, if you had a need to really, if your emotional experience was so big that you actually weren't able to move into curiosity very quickly, would you recommend stepping away? Or are there some words that you would share with us for staying in it while it's happening?
Yes. I mean, I've done this many times. I am so angry right now. I need to take a break to calm down so that we can talk about this. Like what you did really pissed me off. Yeah, and then like the other things that sort of that are really hard to negotiate. I think, you're talking to someone and a lot of times people say, well, you shouldn't feel that way, or you shouldn't do that. And a lot of shoulds. The shoulds are, boy, they're the biggest. They're huge shame creators, and the shoulds of society and the shoulds of our family of origin are in us. Really contorting us on how we feel we should be versus how we are. And so that's, one thing that when someone says, you really, shouldn't be that way, I sort of always come back, that's really curious. Why shouldn't I? Where'd you get that idea? What does that mean to you? Again, you can lean in with some like assertive curiosity. Where did you get the idea that that was bad, or that there's not other ways to do things? See, the key to communication is to be calm enough to be able to think, right? That's that feeling, dealing, and relating all at the same time. And it takes a lot of internal work while in the midst of having an emotion to slow down and breathe, which is what is precisely the thing that calms the emotion. When you can, and it's very hard to do.
A lifelong practice.
Lifelong practice.
Well, we have about 8 more minutes left in this room, and I know there's a couple questions. I know that Damon, you have a question, and before I field that one, I just wanted to bring up this question that Danny put in the chat because I think it's really interesting. And Danny wrote, I've heard many times that there is always something underneath anger, that anger is never just anger. Is that true? If anger is a core emotion, as a masculine identified person, I find anger is easier to feel, more easy than vulnerable emotions like fear or sadness. So sometimes I guess my anger feels like a defense. Would you mind speaking to this?
Yes. Who asked that question? What's the name?
Danny.
Oh, hi, Danny. Oh, so good to see you. Yeah, it's such a great question. So all the core emotions can also be used defensively as defensive emotions. So that was quite brilliant. And it particularly, I am one of those people that when I felt frightened, this is a lot in parenting, and parents do this when they fear for their kids, they get angry, and it's not really, it's like a crusty kind of defense. You kind of get, I would call it my angry tightness, where I'm sure, you know, the tone is, and the energy is just palpable. You get a little bit more controlling, a little bit more short in the tone. But the way to figure out if you're having a core emotion or a defensive emotion is by reading about these core emotions and the adaptive purpose of each one. So if core anger is a response to being attacked, and you were attacked and you feel angry, or you were humiliated or insulted, right? If we were physically attacked or an attack on our personhood, we can predict we will get angry. And but if we experienced a loss, which would elicit sadness and grief, and yet we find ourselves angry, like I think, just to make a generalization, like you said, Danny, many men in our culture suffer a tremendous amount of sadness and fear, and it's all channeled into what are acceptable masculine emotions, which would be anger and sexual excitement. And what happens is that emotions can bind to one another, and what it's very hard to figure out what you're feeling. They come up together. Particularly shame can bind to other emotions, and in fact that's how we learn in childhood to automatically squash emotions, because as soon as we feel, if I'm a woman or if I'm a little girl and I'm told, oh no, you know, it's not nice for little girls to be angry, then I'm feeling shamed. I've been shamed for my anger from the outside, and now whenever anger comes up, it's going to be sort of wired to shame, and I'm instead going to feel ashamed of myself. And that happened also to me for many years. I wrote about I write a lot about personal stuff. So there's an article that I wrote for Oprah magazine called How Rewiring My Brain Changed My Relationship. And it was about trying to undo the shame, both from assertiveness, from caring about my own needs, not being a caretaker to the men in my life. And anytime that I felt, you know, that sort of core anger, like, I don't want to, I have to take care of myself, right? More setting limits and boundaries. I couldn't set those limits and boundaries because I felt so ashamed that I had those limits and boundaries and needs. And and I rewired my brain. And now my poor husband, I'm like, no, you cooked dinner tonight. You set the table tonight, without any shame. And it's very helpful for the relationship, but hard.
Thanks,
Great.
My
Thanks,
pleasure.
Jamie.
Thanks for asking. Such a good question.
We have one little quick clarification question from Marina. You mentioned talking about the triangle, using fantasy to satisfy impulses. Do you remember when we were talking about that?
It was
She
in
was just
the,
looking for a little bit more clarity.
yeah, that was in the change triangle cheat sheet. Yeah, what's the great way to see how that works is to listen to the audiobook or pick up a copy of the book where you can see what that looks like in detail in these 7 stories that I write about, and it's not always depression. And then I have a blog post that says called Start Fantasizing. So if you Google Start Fantasizing and Hillary Jacobs Hendel, you'll find that. But in a nutshell, emotions have impulses and energy that push up for expression. So again, let's say I always use my poor husband as an example, but let's say he says something that that he said again and again that just really, really, really pisses me off. I will feel, and it's the same thing again, and I've told him a million times, I'm going to have anger come up and I'm going to feel an impulse. And that impulse really may be because anger, these are primitive programs that evolved over hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. These core emotion programs, and anger is all about self-defense. So when you really are with letting your anger come up and do what it wants to do, it doesn't really want to do nice things. It may want to be insulting, it may want to say mean things, and it may want to hit and punch and rip. And we can learn to listen and tolerate the impulse, right? These sensations, and let and they manifest. And so if I help people do this, we stay with the impulse of the anger, and I'll ask someone, what does that impulse want to do if it could come up and out of you and onto the person who caused the anger? And it may be that you want to just bash them in the face. So sorry to be so, graphic, but I just want people to get familiar that you're not bad for that. We are not bad. We're only bad if we do it, but we're not bad if we recognize the impulse. And because we know from science and brain imaging that when you imagine what the impulse of an emotion wants to do, it often satisfies as though you're actually doing it. And they know this from imaging people who imagine running. It lights up the same parts of the brain as if you're actually running. So what people who have a lot of anger that's been buried by depression, we help them liberate the anger and imagine what they want to do to the people that hurt them. They're usually their mother, their father, their partners, their siblings, the people that bullied them. We imagine exactly what the program tells it, and it's incredible that the body is the keeper of the truths. The body is the archive of all our memories that were important. And so when we just with a gentle, curious stance are with that energy, I'll say, where do you feel that anger? How is it moving? If it could come up and out, what would it do? And the fantasy takes shape. Yeah, I want to punch my mother right in the mouth. Okay, can you let yourself imagine, let that anger do what it wants to do, not as a dress rehearsal and not like you're making it up in your head, but really dictated by the feeling and the energy in the body. And when you do it, I want you to imagine in fantasy that it's so real that it's like a movie. So you feel the impact of your fist on your mother's face, and keep letting that anger out, do whatever it needs to do until that energy is out of your body and you feel done. And because core emotions really in their pure form only last a few minutes, sure enough, this happens like clockwork. It's the phenomenology, it's how emotions work. person will do it. It'll be done. I'll say, now, what do you see now? My mother's on the floor. Her face is all bloody. Okay, what does that feel like inside? What is the anger like inside now? It's gone. I feel relieved. What emotions come up in the anger's wake? Well, I feel sad now. I feel sad that she was so mean that I had to do that. Yes. And then we're with the sadness and processing that and letting that come and giving that comfort. And then we enter that open-hearted state. You know, once those emotions are cleared, everything reorganizes in the brain and we feel better, and it doesn't make us more angry. It doesn't, people get frightened if you actually turn into the anger and let it do what it needs to do. They get afraid that they will lose control. It's actually the opposite that happens. The people who are violent in our society are those people that can't fantasize in this type of way, that can't make use of their anger, so they have a feeling and the action at the same time. And we're trying to separate the experience, the feeling of emotion with how they are in the body, what their impulses are, what they're pulling for, what they're telling us, with a big gap and space to think through the action that is constructive for ourselves, for our relationships, for society.
What a powerful distinction, and a powerful way to, use this incredibly potent tool we have, our imagination, to actually be with and process some of these things.
No, it's great. I use imagination all the time, and for every emotion. It's really, for excitement. When good things happen, people are afraid to lean into excitement because they're worried about their grandiosity. And if you let that, if something good happens to you and you get a promotion and it triggers all these like, oh, I'm great, which we're told to squash down. But if you help people have these big emotions, they just get more confident, and then you can have the grandiose fantasy. But then once that's out, it's replaced by, again, level-headedness, by the open-hearted, authentic self, which is compassionate and not arrogant.
Yeah, it occurs to me that we can use fantasy actually as a part of this, leaning into feeling the emotion as fully as possible.
Well,
Yeah, and
I to jump in here. Team Hillary, we love hearing you speak, and gosh, I wish we had some more time for you this afternoon, but we will have to kind of wrap up for right now. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Hillary Jacobs Hindle. She's the author of It's Not Always Depression, and has created the Change Triangle, which is that emotional tool that we've been discussing this whole session. Big thanks to her. If anybody wants to unmute and give her a round of applause just to show her some gratitude. And
yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. It's such an honor and a pleasure. And I hope all of you will visit my website at hillaryjacobshendel.com and stay in touch through my blog, through my sign up if you like to receive one email a month only with a new article that's all about relationships, working the change triangle, emotions, trauma. And I would love to stay in touch that way. Then we're connected through email.